Hi easel lovers, how are you all doing today? Let me tell you, we continue to be absolutely blown away by what you amazing people out there create with our palette designer. I mean, look at all of these beautiful creations that you have put together over the last couple of months. This year alone, you've already designed collectively over 500,000 palettes, where you have collectively spent almost 9 years in our palette designer. And the current record for the longest palette design session is at 4 hours. And I know what you're thinking, that palette must be absolutely amazing, and it is. But you don't need that kind of patience to get to your dream palette, and that's what this video is all about. I'm going to show you the ins and outs of our palette designer, every little hidden feature that you never knew existed. Oh, and if you're watching this before July 26th, 2021, there is probably a sale going on our website for build your own palettes, so check that out, of course. All right, let's get started, shall we? To get to our palette designer, just go to our website, lethalcosmetics.com, and then there's 3 different ways to access it. The easiest way is probably to go to the home page and then scroll right below the header image, and there's this little tile here that takes you directly to the palette designer. You can also reach the palette designer through the main menu. And there's a third way, which is my favorite, which is to go to our palettes and bundles section, pick a palette that you like and that you think would be a good starter palette for you, and then hit the customize button. That takes you right into the palette designer, and you can move all the shades around, customize all the colors, all of that good stuff. No matter how you get to our palette designer, you're going to be taken to this screen right here. And if you open the palette designer for the first time, you're going to be shown a tutorial. Now, under normal circumstances, I would strongly advise you to check out the tutorial because it's very thorough. It takes you through all the necessary steps to get your palettes built. But because you're watching this video and I'm going to tell you all about the palette designer, you are free to skip this at this time. There's a question mark icon right here that you can always click that takes you back to the tutorial, and then you can just take it once again. The palette designer generally takes you to the last palette you've been working on, but if you ever want to start fresh, there's this plus button right here that will allow you to basically start with a clean canvas. Now let's head over to the products view. If you're on mobile, the products view is hidden behind this plus button right here, and if you have a wider screen, you're going to see this permanently on the right side of your screen. From here, you can access our entire catalog of powder products and palettes. For now, we're going to skip palettes and go straight to shadows and look at all of those amazing eyeshadows that we have. Right now, we're at 108 shadows, which is a pretty staggering amount, but I'll also show you ways to find your way around all of these shadows, of course. For now, let's get some of these shadows into our palette. The easiest way to do that is just to tap on shadows that you like. That's also generally how I advise people to start their palettes. Just go through our catalog and pick a few shades that you think would be nice in your palette or that you enjoy the shade of. So here are a few shades that I picked. This looks pretty decent already, but of course the way that the shadows are aligned is not really perfect. There's some shadows missing. But the good thing is once the shadows are in your palette, you can still move them around like this. Just drag and drop them to where you want them to go. Similarly, you can also drag and drop shadows from the products view directly into a specific location of your palette. And that's perfect if you already have somewhat of a color story going and you just want to fill the gaps. This works exactly the same way on mobile. The only thing you have to remember here is that on mobile, you have to drag those shadows upwards. That will close the products drawer and you have an unobscured view of your palette and can just put the shadows right where you want them. Now here's a pro tip for you. If you drag a shadow from the products view into your palette over an existing shadow, that original shadow will be deleted automatically. So you don't ever have to take shadows out of your palette. You can just drag new shadows of the existing ones and see what that looks like. Similarly, when you drag a shadow that's in your palette over another shadow in your palette, those two will switch places. And that's really useful when you have a palette that's already filled and you just want to rearrange stuff. One thing to watch out for is that if you position your shadow that you're dragging over multiple shadows below it, all of those shadows will be removed. So if you drop an eyeshadow in your palette, you want to look out for this little white rectangle, which indicates where that shadow will be placed. And make sure that aligns well with the shadow that you want to override. Otherwise, weird things are going to happen. Now, if you actually want to remove an eyeshadow from your palette, that's of course also possible. Just start dragging the shadow and don't let go. What you're going to see is that below the palette, there's these 3 icons that appear, and the center one is the trash bin. This is where you can get rid of all the shadows that you don't want just by moving your mouse or your finger over the icon and dropping the shadow into it. Of course, it's going to happen over the course of you designing your own palette that you're going to make changes that you're not 100% sure about. For that reason, we have implemented an undo feature in our palette designer. So whenever you do anything that you're not 100% sure of, you can always go back as many steps as you like. Something that is bound to happen to you is that as you put together your palettes, you're going to lose track of what kind of shadows and face powders you've already put in there. And this is actually a feature that was requested so many times, and it just goes to show that if you nag us enough, we'll implement pretty much anything you tell us to. So what you can do now is, if you have a mouse, you just move your mouse cursor over any product and leave it there for a bit, and it will pop up this shy little window here, which has a bunch of information over the product that you have your mouse over. It has pictures, it has swatches, it has the full ingredient list. On mobile, you have the same feature, except it's accessible via long press. So you just long press on any product and it will give you all of this information. This works both with stuff that's already in your palette and also with items inside of your catalog. So if you want to know more about an eyeshadow before you put it in the palette, that's also possible, of course. One of the cool things about our magnetic system is that it's not just eyeshadows, but also face powders. If you expand the highlighters and blushes and bronzer section, you can see that there's even more products to choose from. Not only can you create palettes that are exclusively eyeshadows or exclusively face powders, you can also create hybrid palettes that contain both. And that's really great if you want to create, for example, a travel palette, or if you're a pro makeup artist and want to create your ideal kit. Our face powder pans are bigger than our eyeshadow pans for obvious reasons, but you can still fit them perfectly into one palette. So let's create a half shadow, half face powder palette together. I already have 6 shadows assembled here in my palette. I'm already digging this color story. But what I would like to add is a highlighter and a blush. Now let's grab one of the highlighters, add them into the palette, and voila. Now the thing that you can probably see is that I would not be able to fit another blush in there, but you can imagine that if I rotated the highlighter a little bit, it would all work out perfectly. Luckily, that's also something you can do in the palette designer. Just grab the highlighter and hold it, wait until the 3 icons below the palette appear, and these ones on the left and right will rotate the pan you're currently dragging. So just drag the pan over one of these icons and it will rotate in the direction of the arrow. We're going to do the same for a blush, and we have a perfectly assembled hybrid palette here. Speaking of palettes, of course, you can also switch the empty palette that you base your palette designs on. By default, we show you this freestyle palette called Synergy, but there are plenty of other options to choose from. The good thing is you can always switch between different palette styles, even if there's already shadows in yours or face powders as well. The only thing to watch out for is, especially if you're going from a larger palette to a smaller, there will of course be some casualties. The good news is you can also always undo changing your palette, and then you're back in safe territory. All right, we've already covered a lot of ground here, but there's a few more things to get into. One thing that's really important is saving. We work really hard to make sure that you never lose your palette design. So the palette designer will actually save your palette every time you make a change. Now this feature is quite limited if you don't have a Lethal Cosmetics account, so I recommend creating one, because then you get a wonderful history of every palette that you've ever created, so you're never going to lose any of your hard work, and you can always go back to a previous design. To access your saved palettes, just click on this icon right here and you get this wonderful view of everything you've worked on before. From here, you can load all of these palettes and keep working on them if you like, or you can delete the ones that you don't care about anymore. At the time I'm recording this video, we had 108 eyeshadows, 28 face powders, and 10 empty palettes to choose from, and I know this can get a little bit overwhelming. So for this reason, we've added a lot of features to our palette designer to search, filter, and sort our vast product catalog. Let's start with searching. If you know the name of a product, you can just start typing into this box and it will show you only the products that match what you've typed. To sort our catalog, just click on this button here. There's many different sort options, but my absolute favorite is to actually sort by color, which is really helpful if you're working on a theme palette and just want to see what other shades work well with the ones you already have in your palette. You can also sort from light to dark or dark to light, which is great if you want to add a little bit more contrast to your palette. And you can also sort from new to old, so you just see the shadows that we've just most recently added. Now for the really powerful stuff, filtering. You can filter by color, again, really great for theming. You can just look at warm tones, cool tones, or neutrals. You can filter by finish, by shift, by price, by availability, and my favorite, by whether something is already in your stash. That's right. Our palette designer is a great tool to shop your own stash to find new ways to combine the shadows that you already own. If you select only in my stash, you will only see the products that you already have in your collection, and vice versa. If you select not in my stash, you will only see the products that you don't already own. In any case, products that you already own are marked with a little star icon. So even if you don't have this filter active, you can still see which ones you have and which ones you don't. We also heard from you that you wanted a way to customize your stash a little bit. Maybe you purchased a product from another stockist, maybe you've used up the product or you've gifted it to somebody else. And for this reason, we created the My Stash page, which you can reach through your account, but also through this Manage link here inside of the Palette Designer. And this shows you everything that you own from Diesel Cosmetics. This is really great to give you an overview of what you have. It also shows you when you purchased a specific item, but it also lets you tap any item to add it or remove it from your stash. With our Palette Designer, whenever you fill up a palette, no matter the size, you get a 20% discount over the cost of the individual items. But on the weekend of July 24th, 2021, and all the way until Monday, the 26th, we have increased this discount to 30%. So now is the perfect time to grab your dream palette and apply all the tips I just gave you. That said, thank you so much for sticking around to the end. Have fun, and of course, stay lethal.